Blood Money, The Ghost Ledger, Part 2. For 17 years, the death of Victor Hale was the fixed star in Havenbrook's dark constellation, an official narrative of corporate debt, marital betrayal, and tragedy. It was a story secured by the confession of Daniel Cross, who admitted to both his partner's death and the later, panicked murder of Victor's widow, Leah Hale. It was a story neat enough for the courts, allowing the town and the surviving company to move on. But justice built on a lie is a fragile thing. That perfect structure finally began its agonizing collapse not in a high-stakes courtroom, but in the stale, fluorescent chill of a maximum security prison cell. It started with a piece of forgotten hardware, a small, rugged flash drive, carefully retrieved from Daniel's meager possessions by his son Ethan Cross. For Ethan, worn down by years of fighting the decay of his family name, this flash drive was the only bullet he had left. The prison visitation room was a symphony of cold hums and the scent of institutional cleaning agents. Across the gray table from Ethan sat Mark Ashton, the family's longtime legal counsel, his expensive suit looking painfully out of place. Mark connected the flash drive to an encrypted laptop, the process fraught with legal maneuvering and the risk of further sanction. "This is irregular, Ethan," Mark muttered, his eyes darting toward the observation mirror. "If the authorities find out you introduced unauthorized data into the system, they can do whatever they want." Ethan cut him off, his gaze locked on the screen. "It came from my father's things. He said if anything was left, it was meant for me. Just open it." After Mark typed a complex sequence, the screen blinked once, then filled with a single massive file directory. It was labeled with an almost poetic cynicism, ghostledger.xlsx. "The Ghost Ledger," Mark read, tracing the name with a hesitant finger. "Sounds like something from a bad crime novel." "It's not poetry, Mark. It's the mechanism of the collapse," Ethan explained, leaning in, the harsh light reflecting the determination in his eyes. "He once told me he kept a shadow copy, a backup he could never let anyone find. A ledger that told the real story of every dollar. The ghost dollars." Mark opened the spreadsheet. It was a forensic nightmare. Tens of thousands of rows deep, meticulous, and completely unorganized by standard accounting principles. It logged transactions, dates, and cryptic codes that bore no resemblance to any official Cross and Hale records. "A masterclass in financial fraud," Mark whispered, scrolling rapidly. "Look at these dates. This goes back to 2003 before the debt was public. The crisis wasn't sudden, it was a slow-motion collapse, orchestrated and managed." Ethan urged him on. "Keep scrolling. I need to know if it holds anything about Leah Hale." The scroll was long, tracing years of sophisticated deception. Mark stopped on a series of transactions marked LH settlement. The dates were post-murder, post-trial. Large sums, clean wire transfers, leaving zero trail on the official company books. "Payments," Mark confirmed, running a hand through his hair. "Massive, anonymous payments starting just after the lake house fire. Daniel was paying someone off." "No," Ethan argued, a tight, hollow sound in his throat. "Not him. Look at the column for origination ID. The ID for every payment." Mark followed the column to the unexpected code. GC007, Mark breathed, lifting his head. "What in God's name is GC007? Ethan leaned back, the color draining from his face as the weight of the realization settled over him. "That's not my father's code. He used DC. Victor used GC. GC is Grant Calloway. Grant Calloway wasn't just a partner. He was the ghost in the Cross and Hale machine. Daniel was the swagger, the face, the public investor. Victor was the operational visionary. But Calloway? He was the absolute, meticulous infrastructure of their wealth. The chief financial officer who could make $500,000 vanish into thin air and reappear in a holding company 3 months later, looking like legitimate expenses. The ghost ledger, Ethan realized with a sickening jolt, wasn't Daniel's creation at all. It was Calloway's masterpiece. As investigative journalist Mia Ridge later observed, "When you look at corporate crime, the most dangerous person isn't the one shouting in the boardroom, it's the person managing the books." Calloway was quiet, meticulous, and absolutely indispensable. The moment that GC007 code appeared, the entire case cracked open. It shifted from a story of a single impulsive murder to a premeditated, corporate-level conspiracy. The revelation of the GC007 code demanded a complete pivot in the cold case investigation led by Detective Rachel Monroe. In the cold case room at the Havenbrook police station, Detective Monroe had rebuilt her board, adding a professional headshot of the composed, silver-haired Calloway. So the son of the killer hands us a spreadsheet implicating a CFO who's been running a respectable business for 20 years, Detective Gary Lee challenged, holding a stale breakfast bar. It smells like a desperate jailhouse play, Monroe. It would, Monroe replied, her eyes locked on the ledger printout pinned to the board. If he had forged it with Daniel's ID. But this uses Calloway's internal code. And look here, Gary. This entry shows Calloway personally authorized the final, massive insurance payout on Victor Hale's life policy, just days before the police closed the case as an accidental death. He's the CFO, Lee countered. Expediting a policy is standard procedure to keep the firm afloat. Monroe turned, her gaze piercing. It would be, if the entire $10 million went back into the firm. But Calloway logged a concurrent transfer of $1.8 million from the payout to a newly created shell company in Belize, a company the ledger metadata confirms Calloway himself registered. That money didn't go back into the company. It went into Calloway's private offshore account. Monroe pointed to another transaction. Calloway had the opportunity to save the company, or he had the opportunity to take the company. He took it by arranging for Victor's death, triggering the policy and paying off the only person, Leah Hale, who might have connected the dots. The implication was horrifying. Daniel Cross wasn't solely responsible. He was a fall guy. A desperate man who believed he was protecting his son by taking the blame for a system engineered by his quiet, efficient, and ultimately more ruthless partner. Calloway was meticulous, chillingly so, recalled Frank Reed, the former Cross and Hale legal counsel. He was the one who handed over all the official ledgers to the police back in 2004, with that polite, sad smile. But if the detective had actually looked beyond the surface, he would have found the offshore accounts Calloway used to hide the ghost ledger assets. In the oppressive dust of the police archive room, Monroe and Lee were hunched over ancient cardboard boxes containing the original 2004 Victor Hale case files. They needed to know why Detective Peter Finch, the lead investigator and a former department gold standard, had missed it. Lee pulled out a file labeled Finch, Financial Review. He lists all the company's major domestic accounts, Lee noted, but he stops there. There's no inquiry into any offshore assets, no investigation into the life insurance policy beneficiaries beyond the initial confirmation. Monroe found a separate internal affairs file relating to Finch's personal finances. The ledger explains the gap, Monroe stated, laying out a timeline. In 2003, Finch was underwater on his mortgage, struggling to pay his son's college tuition. By Q4 of 2004, right after he closed the Hale file, he paid off the mortgage and bought a new boat, cash. Lee stared at the ledger entry Monroe placed next to the mortgage record. GC007. Authorization for special legal consultation fee, $150,000 paid to P. Finch Esq. The gold standard, Lee muttered, shaking his head in disgust. Gold can always be melted down, Gary. Calloway bought Finch's blind eye. He sealed the tomb. Calloway had covered his tracks using a bribe disguised as a legal fee, a bribe only visible in the secret internal ghost ledger. Finch had closed the case on Victor as an accident and never questioned the speed or the true destination of the $10 million payout. The next step was a harrowing return to the prison. Monroe and Lee sat across from Daniel Cross, who now knew the depth of Calloway's betrayal. His relief that Calloway was caught was overshadowed by his profound, agonizing defeat. Mr. Cross, we know about the ghost ledger, Monroe said, placing a summary of the GC007 transactions on the table. We know Calloway murdered Victor. We know he set you up as the fall guy. Daniel stared at the codes, the weight of 17 years of misplaced guilt crashing down. He set me up, he whispered, his voice thin and hollow. Why did you confess to Victor's murder then? Lee pressed. If Calloway was the killer? Because of Leah, Daniel rasped, tears welling up. After the fire, Calloway came to me. He said Leah had found his shadow accounts. He made me believe she was a vengeful lunatic who wanted to destroy Ethan with the truth. He told me to meet her at the gas station, the one near the old highway. She was furious, shouting, GC007. Where is GC007's money? You know. Did you kill her, Daniel? Monroe asked, leaning closer. Daniel closed his eyes, his confession a dry, broken whisper. I was scared. She tried to pull a knife. We struggled. I slammed her head against the car window. She went still. I panicked. I drove her out to the lake. I put her back in the water. I didn't want it to look like murder. I wanted it to look like the first one. Like Victor's accident. Daniel opened his eyes, the terror now replaced by chilling certainty. Calloway wasn't involved in Leah's death. That was my crime. But he used it. He showed me the security camera footage from the gas station, the one he made sure the police never saw. He told me if I confessed to everything, Victor's death, Leah's death, and the financial crimes, he would make sure Ethan was financially secure for life. He promised me he'd erase the ghost ledger. I did it for my son. Monroe simply laid her hand flat on the table, pointing to Calloway's code. He lied, Daniel. The ghost ledger was his security. He never erased it. Daniel bowed his head, his shoulders slumping. I killed Leah Hale. But I didn't kill Victor. Calloway did. The toxic truth was finally revealed. Calloway orchestrated the financial ruin and Victor's murder, using Daniel's greed as a weapon. And when Leah Hale, driven by her own grief, threatened Calloway's empire, Daniel, in a desperate, misguided act, became Calloway's final cleanup crew. The inevitable arrived at a high-end corporate tower at sunrise. Grant Calloway, still impeccably dressed, was arrested on the curb. He was calm, controlled, until Monroe held up the charred flash drive in a clear evidence bag. We found your ghost ledger, Grant. GC007. The controlled facade collapsed, leaving behind the primal panic of a trapped animal. Calloway's meticulousness, the inability to destroy the file that validated his genius, had been his undoing. But the ghost ledger wasn't done talking. Back in the cold case room, after Calloway was booked and Finch was placed under investigation, Monroe reviewed a newly recovered deep scan file from the flash drive. She found one final tiny tab that Calloway himself had labeled P3_final_accounts. It was a single page containing only 2 entries. Code, date, transaction, amount, GC007, November 20, 2004. Final VH policy payment. $1,200,000. P3-001. December 1, 2004. Investment initiation. Matthews account. $150,000. P3-001, Monroe muttered, leaning in to stare at the screen. Who is P3-001? She typed the code into the police database. Nothing. She tried a public records check, searching for the name Matthews in connection with the original Cross and Hale fraud years earlier. The search returned a single, painful result. Elijah Matthews. Elijah Matthews, the face of the town's failure. The most prominent victim of the original Cross and Hale fraud. The man who had lost his home, his business, his savings, whose derelict property became the symbol of the company's decay. The victim got paid? Detective Lee questioned, looking over her shoulder. A substantial investment, no less. Was Matthews threatening Calloway too? No, Monroe said, shaking her head slowly. This isn't a bribe for silence, Gary. This is an investment initiation. The man who lost everything to Cross and Hale fraud received a significant investment from the killer's partner 1 month after the murder. Monroe stood up, her eyes wide, moving to the case board. She added a photo of the long-forgotten Elijah Matthews, pinning it directly next to Daniel Cross and Grant Calloway. Victor, Daniel, Leah. They were all driven by greed or retribution. But Matthews was supposed to be the one who was destroyed by greed, Monroe said, speaking more to the narrative than to her partner. What if he was the very first architect of this whole conspiracy? The one who gave Calloway the playbook to bring the company down from the outside. The ghost ledger had revealed 2 murderers and a corrupted police detective. But the most unsettling question remained in the cold data. Was the biggest betrayal not committed by the killer or the conspirator, but by the very first person ruined by their greed? Was Elijah Matthews, the supposed victim, the true unseen hand? The ghost ledger will return for part 3.